No discussion on economic philosophy is complete without considering the important subject of money. An economy doesn't have to use money in order to function, in the same way that a machine doesn't have to use oil in order to work. But the fact is that money can help economies to work a lot better, just as oil helps machines to work better. Socialists have little regard for money, and generally view it in a similar way that a mechanic considers oil, helpful to the proper working of the machine, but not really as important as the design of the machine itself. Capitalists, on the other hand, not only see money as the very purpose of their existence, they also see it as a commodity in its own right, something which can be bought and sold, something whose value can be increased or diminished by manipulating supply and demand. So by affixing some monetary value to anything and everything needed or produced by an economy, as gangster capitalists do, it's easy to see that whoever controls money supply controls that economy. In this particular debate, socialists easily hold the correct position. Money is a very useful tool to the economy, but is not as important as the design of the economy itself. And as far as reserve currencies are concerned, money should not be treated as a tradable commodity whose value can be easily manipulated by speculators. The physical nature of money is a curious thing, but it's very important to understand it as well as possible. When most people think of money, they think of coins and pieces of paper, which are given some kind of relative value to each other. Some people, who understand the subject quite well, think that this relative value has something to do with a quantity of gold kept safe and sound in some government bank vault somewhere. Although paper money and coins used to have some relationship to stockpiles of gold, today that relationship is fairly tenuous, almost to a point of being non-existent. The overwhelming majority of money in circulation today is no more substantial than fresh air, for the overwhelming majority of it is in the form of credits and debts owned and maintained by the computer systems of privately owned banks. The fact that most money is no more substantial than fresh air is very, very important to understand. This is how most of the world's monetary systems work. In most Western countries today, money used by governments is initially created in deals struck between some central bank and the ruling government. The Reserve Bank's side of the deal is that they will quite literally create money, mostly in cyberspace, which they will supply to governments, plus an interest charge for doing so. The government side of the deal is that they will extract taxes from the working population to repay this borrowed money, plus the interest charge. But the fact is that central banks don't actually have in their possession the physical money they supposedly lend. But governments nevertheless extort taxes from working people to repay something that never existed in the first place. Money circulating in the private sector originates in a very similar way. When a bank agrees to provide a loan to one of its customers, the loan is provided not from some already existing stockpile of money, but by a bank clerk typing a few keys on her computer. Brand new money is created by the simple act of the bank crediting the account of the customer. Believe it or not, this surreal relationship between governments and ordinary people on the one hand and privately owned banks on the other is exactly the way in which money first comes into existence today, out of nothing. And it's very important to bear that fact in mind for what comes up later on in this talk. So, given that money is like the oil of an economy, it should be fairly clear to see that whoever physically controls the supply of money is in a fairly powerful position. Who should occupy that powerful position is one of the core disputes between socialists and capitalists. Socialists argue that the state should control it. Capitalists argue that private banks should. So who's right? To properly answer that question, the discussion needs to widen out to take account of society as a whole. Margaret Thatcher infamously remarked that there's no such thing as society, a view which perfectly reflects the 1%'s position on the subject. Socialists, on the other hand, almost by definition, consider the existence of society as obvious as that of the sun. Thatcher, an arch-gangster capitalist, revealed through her remark the absolute contempt that gangster capitalism of 1% has for the notion of society. She denied the existence of society not once, but twice in the same interview with Douglas Key of Woman's Own in 1987. At the time of the interview, Thatcher had just won with a landslide victory, an exceptional third term in office as British Prime Minister. In other words, she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't some greenhorn rookie. She was a seasoned veteran politician. Unusually, her insolent remarks were almost instantly watered down at the time by her officials. But if there's any evidence that she personally did the watering down, it isn't easy to find. And the fact that she said it twice suggests she meant exactly what she said. The denial of the existence of society by one of gangster capitalism's leading lights is no trivial matter, because what it suggests is that people are and should be on their own in the world, with no more support than what might be offered by their family or friends or by charity. It suggests that people must sink or swim by themselves. It's a philosophy whose only difference to the law of the jungle is that it isn't anywhere near as honest as the law of the jungle. If the sink and swim philosophy was truly held by the doyens of gangster capitalism and applied to themselves, an argument for it could indeed be made. But that's not what happens in the real world. Far from it. I've already mentioned how Andy Grove, the ex-CEO of Intel, echoed Thatcher's views when he said that the purpose of capitalism was to shoot the wounded, which is pretty much the same view that gangsters have. Other leading champions of gangster capitalism are equally forthcoming in providing evidence for the inherent evil of the system that enriches them. Consider, for example, millionaire heiress Leona Helmsley, who infamously pointed out that only the little people pay taxes. Or the billionaire Warren Buffett, who admitted that his cleaner paid more taxes as a proportion of her salary than he did. The fact that governments not only allow non-payment of taxes by multimillionaires, but actively encourage it, whilst providing ruthless official enforcers to ensure that ordinary working people don't neglect to pay their taxes, is just one example of the sink or swim hypocrisy of the gangster capitalists. Sink or swim is not a policy that's applied to the super rich. It's only applied to us, the 99%. As far as the super rich are concerned, the one and only purpose of government is to ensure they never sink. Ms. Helmsley might have said with equal accuracy that laws in general, not just the tax laws, are only meant for little people. If that view seems unjustly harsh or cynical, consider the case in 2012 where the British banking giant HSBC reached a settlement with US Attorney General Lanny Breuer, whereby the bank escaped criminal prosecution for committing massive financial crimes. According to the journalist Matt Taibbi, HSBC admitted to laundering billions of dollars for Colombian and Mexican drug cartels, among others, and violating a host of important banking laws, from the Bank Secrecy Act to the Trading with the Enemy Act. The settlement reached by HSBC might look, at first glance, like a severe punishment, as it agreed to pay what was effectively a fine of $1.9 billion. However, as Taibbi points out, this represents a mere 5 weeks of income for the bank. Furthermore, as anyone knows who followed the shameful story of Enron and the Exxon Valdez disaster, agreeing these legal settlements with mighty corporations is one thing, getting the cash out of them is quite another. Sinking or swimming is the fate of little people, never the super rich, whose only relationship with deep water is via the comfort of luxury yachts. So Thatcher's denial of the existence of society is actually gangster capitalism's denial of the right for social justice for the 99%, at the same time as it bends over backwards to place at the disposal of the 1% the earnings, labour and lives of the 99%. In other words, society, whose very existence is denied by the gangster capitalists, but which actually comprises the 99%, cannot expect the gangster capitalists of the 1% to truly protect their economic interests. So in order to answer the very important question as to who should control the supply of money, the oil of the economy, it should be fairly clear to see that it most certainly should not be the gangster capitalists, the 1%. That only leaves us, the 99%. In theory, there's absolutely nothing to stop governments printing and circulating their own money to finance state projects without using private banks at all. The only reason this doesn't happen is because of the awesome power of the private banking system, which knows full well that the one and only device they have at their disposal to keep their grip on the awesome power they wield is the traditional right they have to print and circulate money. Take away that power and place it where it properly belongs, in the hands of a truly democratic government, and almost overnight the world would start to become a truly humane place. In theory, this would be a very easy thing to do. Realistically, it's not at all easy, not through any fault of the principle, but because of the immense power of the elitist vested interests who would move heaven and earth to stop it from happening. But for now, let's forget about the reality of the gangster capitalists and just focus on the principle of truly democratic governments printing and circulating their own money. In the next part of this talk, I'll show how this has been done before with considerable success.